We are live now. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for the final part of the event, which is the panel discussion. The rolling out of a vaccine for COVID-19 has garnered great interest from people around the globe. However, equally important is to stop the counterfeiting of this vital vaccine. So, for this, we have our esteemed panel, Dr. Emre Göllü, who is working as a Supply Chain Associate Director at UCB. I welcome you to our panel discussion, Emre.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to join this event and the panel discussion. Thanks to you and all contributors, the organizers, especially Platinum Global Solutions, for having devoted this opportunity to be a part. Thanks a lot. Indeed, it's a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much. Okay, so Emre, my first question is, what efforts do you think should be done by the international bodies to prevent the counterfeit products?
I think it has been a lot of efforts if we consider the last decade especially, where the initiatives have started to evolve since 2008 in the ideation phase. And then we have started certain efforts and attempts to start two-dimensional data matrix barcoding and serialization implementations, starting from my country as the initiator here in Turkey. I can tell you, and then it is getting widespread throughout all the geographies at most, because there are two critical factors in terms of here in terms of investment and further deployment. First one is to avoid counterfeit, and the second one is to avoid parallel trade for pharmaceuticals, considering all the global physical flows. And here we can say, I think since 10 years, we have a full-scale system available, including all the stakeholders directly scattered throughout the supply chain nodes, starting from the manufacturers, distributors, companies, 3PLs, wholesalers, pharmacies, and up to end user. It's how to say full traceability is ensured, I think. And this is then getting widespread throughout all over the world, starting in Europe, having directly some trials and applications, partial applications, how to say, in US, Brazil, Argentina, Korea, China, Russia, and then it is getting widespread. And I think this will globalize in regards to the different problems. And despite due to a certain impact of the pandemic, we have been speaking of how to shorten supply chains. I think regardless of the length of the supply chain, this traceability will remain as a key factor, as a key determinant and key necessity for the sake and continuity of a pharmaceutical supply chain, we can say. It is important. And in regards to the traceability, I would like to highlight the following point. Absolutely, it is important to keep certain standards of quality and implementation regarding serialization and 2D data matrix barcoding, but the most important thing is data transmission. To generate data, to transmit the data, and exactly then, in necessary cases, to be able to access the data, pursue the data, and get all the routes of one single pharmaceutical unit, all the paths to be able to discover the whole path along the entire supply chain. This is what is needed practically, and we see, how to say, a high level of adaptation and inclination for increasing investments in this regard, basically said.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. So, Emre, tell me, what do you think is the role of the regulatory bodies in this whole process? We see the COVID-19 vaccine is a very important vaccine, especially in terms of the way people have been suffering from it worldwide.
Absolutely. People have been suffering worldwide. We have seen lots of barriers and obstacles unexpectedly occurring in front of us, and so how to overcome. Indeed, first, the regulatory bodies should be very clear and precise in determining the basic requirements, and as well as they should try to get aligned to themselves, considering the global scale physical flows of pharmaceuticals. And in a majority of the cases, we can say it is possible to speak of alignments in a high percentage. For instance, for the EU, it might be certain the differences, but at how to say low percentages, and possibly the intra-country transfer of goods is possible in terms of traceability, as well as it is the same for Turkey. We see the very similarity for the Middle East and Africa region, where this implementation of full serialization is directly getting deployed a lot towards all the countries, mainly in the Gulf part nowadays. China seems to be a little bit a part of, how to say, a standardized approach, but I think a certain level of alignment would be reached out, and the reporting requirements for Russia is a little bit different, but practically in terms of physical application, it is also, how to say, doable for the companies. We can say it is important for regulatory bodies to consider global scale the general standards and not to dig into very detailed requirements in this regard. That is important, because it's the flow of the physical flows along entire supply chain cannot be changed overnight. It requires certain time and effort for adaptation. Anyhow, this traceability issue is a long way, how to say, in terms of planning, investments, implementation, control, reporting, transmission, all, and therefore it should be a certain level of consensus between regulatory bodies, and the regulatory bodies should steer and guide the stakeholders in the pharmaceutical sector, all companies, 3PL, I think then CPOs, all, because everybody should be fully and clearly aware of what is the position to be granted to itself.
Okay, so you said that the companies have to have certain adaptation strategies. So this brings me to the next question: that what challenges, for that to design the strategies, we should know what are the challenges. So what challenges you see regarding the distribution of this COVID vaccine?
I think not specific to the COVID vaccine, including all the pharmaceutical products, including the vaccine. The main challenge is the operational capability first, because the vaccine requires cold chain distribution, and we have different types of vaccines, and there are also still vaccines under development. For instance, here in Turkey, there is the classical inactive virus type vaccines under development, which is expected to be available by late spring over here. And the distribution circumstances are also important in regards to the traceability. And for the high majority, cold chain will be required. And then implementation of to the data matrix, barcoding, and serialization under cold chain circumstances. That is quite a challenge. For instance, for goods to be stored and kept during transportation below 20 degrees Celsius, this would be a real challenge. This is what the companies needs to look for operations-wise, how to cope with. Otherwise, ideally for 2 and 8 degrees Celsius range, which is considered as generally the cold room temperature and the cold chain circumstances, practically, I think this can be better manageable for the companies as well as the 3PLs in terms of traceabilities. And vaccines will be made ready in this regard.
Okay, so as you said, that a vaccine has to be maintained in a particular temperature to maintain it. So, how do you see the technological interventions as a help, as an assistance agent during this whole process?
Practically, involvement of technology will increase definitely in terms of all development. And if we consider the global scale digitalization trend, regarding health services as well as the processes to be managed by the companies, I think it will significantly increase. And especially I think IoT and artificial intelligence-based solutions will play a key role, ensuring full traceability.
Okay. What do you think are the opportunities and requirements for implementation of the global traceability standards?
First, the physical requirements, definitely, and then the technical requirements. Also, physical in regards to implementation, you have to have sufficient capacity and the packaging lines and equipment to be installed accordingly for physical application. Then, data generation and transmission, you have to have the software available, and you have to determine, indeed, and get aligned with the authority how to transmit the data. And if we speak of overseas physical flows, I think then how to transfer the data. It's an important point here to be clarified at the beginning, because one side will transmit the data and the other side will directly retrieve the data throughout a system or a channel and then directly process the data. And the data should, how to say, be easily reachable and processable in this regard, because it's not a simple reporting issue. It's a real, it's an official requirement for both sides, the sending side and the receiving side. Therefore, it is important to ensure accuracy of the data as well as, how to say, continuous and um, valid transmission of the data. That's the important point.
Okay. Because traceability standards are global, so how do you see that a common ground can be reached by different countries on this? Because everybody is suffering equally.
This is specific to the vaccines, or in general, you mean, in regards to
Both,
traceability system?
both of
Maybe
them.
we can elaborate a little bit on this question.
Yes, both of them. Both of them.
Yeah, I'm not particularly focusing on vaccines, because vaccines can be easily exempted from this traceability, because consider that the governments are taking care of vaccines received, distributions, and direct application to patient. Vaccination rounds are fully managed by the governmental bodies over there. I don't see a real burden and some issue to be worried about in this regard. The most important thing is to ensure physical distribution of goods along the supply chains, which do differ based on the geographies and particularly through certain countries in this regard. And the most important thing, as I said, to ensure the basics should be identical in regards to traceability systems, especially regarding data transmission requirements. Even the official bodies should take care of that. There are a lot of global flows, physical flows, where goods directly make certain stops at different geographies. So how the data will follow this and will get aligned to this flow. This is also important. This is
Okay.
important. Also, the basic requirements should match, in my opinion.
Okay. So for that, everybody should be on the same table, right?
I think so. I think so. Because, yeah, current constraints are very clear and very obvious. So I don't see any further benefits for none of the stakeholders via insisting to have very, very specific implementations and implications accordingly. It should be general standards considered and applied accordingly to ensure full pursuit and access and exchange of data.
Okay. So
That's how it is supposed to be practically.
Okay. How do you see the? Is there any particular technology that can be used for the traceability? Um, you talked about the Internet of Things. You talked about the artificial intelligence. So can you be please more specific about it?
Honestly speaking, I haven't digged in so specifically. That is the trend, regarding the reporting requirements and time utilization. I'm plugging in, sorry, the charger in the meantime to avoid any interruption in our connection. Yeah, it might evolve due to the needs. We cannot fix up according to some certain technology existing. Even we can speak of further tailor-made solutions in this regard based on these technologies, covering the basic and simple requirements of the traceability systems in place.
Okay.
What is needed is data transmission, I can tell you. And as soon as these technologies would help forward to ease up and to strengthen the quality of data transmission, they would be favorable, in my opinion. That's my personal opinion, how to say.
I can't agree more. Can't agree more on that. So, thank you so much, Dr. Emre Göllü,
My pleasure.
for
My
your
pleasure.
valuable point of view. So,
any question from the audience, from the participants?
so if anybody has any questions, they can drop in the main chat, and we have Dr. Emre, and he will surely answer your queries.
Absolutely, with pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so with this panel discussion, we have reached the end of our conference. On behalf of Platinum Global Solutions, I would like to thank all of our stakeholders, delegates, sponsors, and especially our speakers, without whom this conference would not have been possible. We will be back with novel themes in the coming months in the field of RFID and supply chain. Thank you so much. I really hope you had a great time.